listening to CaveRadioBroadcasting.com. The words and opinions you are about to hear are of the hosts and do not reflect the management of CaveRadioBroadcasting.com.
Welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole. I am Dave Hooper. Today is February 22nd, 2018, and you are listening to a GenPopMedia.com production. Starting off by saying thank you to the forces above us that keep this world spinning, or whatever is spinning.
Whatever it's doing.
Also,
or not.
I'd like to add thank you also to them for keeping the Illuminati from killing us. So
I'm into that.
I'm here with Howard, Dave D, Kat, special guest is here today. Tony is
on assignment.
Not stuck in traffic.
On assignment.
Yeah, he's
On
working.
assignment. Chris is on the board. I will say that I was listening to the first show of the year, which I think was January 11th.
Yeah.
Okay.
I laughed so hard. Howard said, "So we're turning over a new leaf here in 2018. Hooper's 3 minutes out and Tony's stuck in traffic." I laughed for an hour, but we are turning over a new leaf.
Several, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Couple get the rest of the intro stuff out of the way. I want everyone to also remember it is not down the conventional hole. It is down the rabbit hole. And our advice, as always, is don't trust any one person, and that even includes us. We discuss things on the fly. There are things that we've said recently that absolutely contradict things that we thought or believed a year or two ago. We are bringing you guys along as we ourselves are waking up to the reality of what's going on in this world. So at the end of the day, Howard says it best, do your own research. Don't take what we say as gospel. Now, this is from Howard, unless it is the gospel. And it is very simple. It's because there really are no more secrets. You can find out everything. There are no more secrets, just ignorance. That's it.
Tons of it.
Yeah.
It's oozing.
Everywhere.
The cup is overflowing.
Oozing.
Yeah. Never have to worry about running out of ignorance.
Yeah, but since I have possession of this microphone right now, I'm going to make a couple shameless plugs.
Here we go.
Do it.
Self-serving and otherwise.
Something just...
Oh, you do.
Oh,
Don't mess with me.
He just whited
I
you
have
out.
the mic, and it's heavy enough to be used as a
Now
weapon.
we know the real power source.
The power. It's like air. So,
You got it, man.
we've mentioned it a while, but we're about to do reboot on the DCD Foundation. The DCDFoundation.org. There's some stuff happening. It's a nonprofit charity organization that we started a couple years back. We've done some good things, and we're about to update all of our media soon. But we still obviously will accept donations at thedcdfoundation.org.
In a sentence or two, what are the good things you guys do? I already know, but for our listeners.
The main thing we're focusing on is supporting education, specifically in the Philippines, by providing things these poor kids don't have. And I mean poor, not looking for sympathy. I mean poor, like poverty poor.
It's a real poor. It's
For real.
unlike thing. It's nothing we really see in this country. Yes, it also exists, but
Not anything like this.
Their norm is our extreme.
Yeah, the kids we focus on are kids that literally have nothing. The fact that they have clothing to wear is quite a miracle, actually. So, real quick, the last event we did, we provided backpacks for 180 students. That was 2 from each grade, and they were the 2 that were the most unfortunate ones in each class. So the poorest of the poor people, basically.
Yeah, I went through, I believe it was 700.
Yeah, 700, yeah.
I went through each one.
There are
and
more than 700.
You can
There's
see.
a lot.
You can
So
see
it was a very, very cool event, and we managed to get hooked up with a woman who is friends with my wife. They went to school together. She's a teacher at the school, so she's on the ground there. Cherry Lynn, definitely a blessing to have been have her inserted in our life because she is going to be our soldier there.
Yeah, I personally vouch for the DCDfoundation.org, without a doubt.
Yeah, we're not messing around. We don't take any salary. Everything's all volunteer. And all the money we bring in that doesn't go to government oversight, compliance, etc., goes directly to these efforts.
Unlike with a lot of other, and I can also say this about my friend Dave DiBiase here, who runs it. He's not using it to make payments on his new Porsche or anything like that. This actually goes to where it's needed. And
and it's quite effective so far. Our model is very effective. There's almost zero overhead because Cherry Lynn, who's also a teacher there, this just so happens to be her passion is charity work there. She's constantly, all the time, doing stuff for elderly folks there, for the children around. She's constantly doing this, and it fits right into her kind of what she's already doing.
So at the end of the day, most of the donation, just about all of it, actually goes to work, as opposed to, I mean, we've all seen these charities where for every dollar given, 80 cents goes to salaries of the people and expense accounts, yada yada. But at the end of the day, there's such a small percentage that actually gets to the people that need it, and you guys are completely flip flopped in that.
Yeah, in fact, the volunteer base that we had there, the people that jumped on board, there was, I don't know, at least a dozen people that helped in the effort. None of them, and all of these people are in need, actually. But none of them asked for anything. I mean, we fed them and paid for taxi fares and stuff, but that's what you have to do it somehow. But no, we are not taking any money out of this for our own use whatsoever. It's all volunteer on our end. So it's a good organization. That it's in its infancy, right? We're not a big, gigantic organization with a ton of money. We don't have much money at all. You'd be surprised what we were able to do with the amount of money we actually needed to do it. Less than $2,000 made that happen. So, and this is 8,000 some miles away. So it was a pretty good effort. So the DCDfoundation.org, it's something that we care a lot about. So
that's awesome.
And Autorama Detroit coming up March 2nd through the 4th. I'll be there painting. There's going to be a lot of talented people there.
So remind me. I want to go to that.
I want to go to that too.
Check it out, Detroit. I think it's $20 for admission. I believe you can get discount tickets online. I'm not sure, but there's going to be a lot of cool stuff going on down there, and I'll be there all weekend. And that would be for DCD Labs, my art work.
Is that .com or .org?
.com, and that is active, but there's no content yet.
Yeah,
so
you can email for information.
Yep.
At the moment.
Yep, DCDlabs@yahoo.com.
Check out how cool the logo is.
Or you can just come down to Autorama
and see how cool the background. It took me 4.5 hours obsessing over backgrounds on the website is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll have it on a
It's
T-shirt.
like which black was the perfect background. Yeah.
So, but that's a cool event. Either way, it supports the city. It supports a lot of local.
Yeah, Autorama's
a lot of local artists, a lot of local vendors, and there are a slew of very, very talented individuals going to be under one roof that weekend, and it's a worthwhile thing to do.
Any other? Didn't mean to cut you off.
It's okay.
Anything else?
I just said it would be fun.
Any other? I was going to say any
and
other.
You said it with such enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Any other shameless plugs before we jump into our topic tonight?
I have a beard now. That's it. I'm good now. I'm good.
All right. Yeah. We're plugging Dave's beard.
Yeah.
I like you with some scruff, by the way.
Hey, man, my wife said she likes it, so I'm growing it.
I think it suits you.
Yeah. Oh, today's my anniversary. Sorry.
Happy
One more.
anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
10 years.
Catherine has a great new hairdo.
How many years?
10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So, wow.
Congratulations, Grace.
Yeah.
I don't think I've done anything in my life for 10 years.
You guys have been celebrating like all week. I've been following your wife on Facebook.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool.
You're my new model couple. Like, I want to be feeling about my wife the way you feel about Grace.
Yeah.
It's awesome, I got to tell you. It's pretty awesome. So, I'm a lucky guy.
He had to jump through a few hurdles to get there, people. But persistence pays.
Probably 60,000 miles on an airplane and tens of thousands of dollars and whatever. But, no, it was worth I'd do it 10 times over, no question.
All right, so today I wanted to talk about relating to God. And this came off of just a serendipitous conversation I had with our friend Nick, who is going to go today. He's actually at the boat show part of Autorama.
Okay.
So he couldn't make it. Although he loaned me his car. What a stud. Last night I'm driving home from a business meeting, and I'm cutting through Detroit on Gratiot, and one pothole gave me 2 flat tires. So around midnight, I'm just sitting there in a lousy part of town, totally calm and cool, just waiting. And part of that calm and cool feeling originated, and I ended up finding the show. We did a show on October 5th of 2017. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but in that show I'd said, like, I felt like something had changed for me. It's when I'd gone from knowing God from afar, like the metaphor I'm going to use is like reading about him on a resume versus actually shaking his hand, hugging him, and having more of a relationship with him. And even at the time, I said, I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know if I'm going to be back in a dumper, because I've been it's been a pretty rough few years. And you guys know I wear it on my sleeve. If things are going well, I'm talking about it. The hurdles we all face, we talk about those. And I think that's one of the good things about this show is we're not trying to oversell all of the benefits of, to use Kat's word, our walk. But at the end, the benefit will absolutely outweigh whatever trials and tribulations we go through. And that was in response to, I was kind of cynically wondering, what is it about some of these folks that obviously are Christian that you see on YouTube where they're talking about how just wonderful and happy they are. They feel so fulfilled. And I did not have that. I didn't see it. And I knew it was biblical because Paul himself, formerly Saul of Tarsus, but Paul himself is in prison. He knows he's about to die, and he's happy as hell. And so I know it's biblical. I see other people do it. Whether they're being sincere or not, hard to tell. All I knew was that I had not personally had that feeling. So we're 4.5 months on now, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that, talk a little bit about all your guys' relationship with the same power source I'm talking about, and combine it with this conversation I had with Nick that I can't tell you how awesome this was. It was 6 hours on a Saturday night. He's just driving by. I'm like, pop in. That was 9 o'clock at night just this last Saturday. And at 3 a.m., we're both way more in touch, enlightened, whatever kind of word you want to use. And we're going to get into that, but I wanted to essentially bring that conversation here on air, because what developed on Saturday night is we started to look at the relationship humans have with God by looking at, in particular, I wanted to focus on 3 human institutions: the U.S. Army, a Fortune 500 company, and our K through 12 education system, and maybe draw some things out of how humans interact with authority. And like I said, I'm still learning. This is something I feel is certainly closer to the truth than what I was feeling, let's say, a year or 2 ago. This does not mean that this is, to be stamped and approved. And I may be feeling differently or continue evolving in a different direction. But to keep in line with our promise to always share what we're going through, I wanted us to spend a little time talking about this stuff. So, with that said, I'm going to just summarize how I've been feeling over now the last 4.5 months, and then I want to throw it out to you guys, and then maybe kind of run through some examples of how these institutions that I just mentioned might actually mimic how heaven and God operate. Might. It's a feeling. I think it's biblical. Our man Tony, who I was hoping to have him on the spot as passage looker upper, we might see if we can recruit Catherine here on the fly. But even without it, we'll do our best to have this supported by the words that were written as long as 2,000 years ago and as early as 3,400 years ago. That now, after I've looked into it, I can't, it's just unbelievable still. But there is, not only is there not a mistake in that book, the level of precision in that book for me is absolutely off the charts. And if you believe in God and if you believe in the Bible, everything in this world would make sense. All these conspiracy theories, all the problems in the world, all these things that are these big question marks, if you so seek, you can discover these things with clarity. And you may know a few things, but the big picture will elude you without understanding what is written in that book. And I'm betting my life on it, literally. I don't know what else, how much more I can emphatically say that I think that is the key, not just to understanding, but at the end of the day, it's a word I still don't like because it's such a cliche word, but it's the key to salvation. And we're not talking about saving your physical body. Our physical bodies, every last one of us, have physical bodies that will one day stop working. I'm talking about the engine in that body, which is your soul. And actually, we're not bodies that have a soul. We are souls that have a body, meaning once this body stops working, something is going to, our souls are going somewhere. Our being does not terminate with life. Very hard to prove. Maybe impossible to prove. And maybe that's the part where faith comes in. But in my mind, there is absolutely no doubt about that fact, that our souls are eternal. Are we all on that page, by the way?
100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right with you.
Okay.
Yeah, the intrinsic you is not what you see in the mirror.
Correct.
It's not. That's actually not even really there, but that's a whole other show.
So overall, the last 4 months, just want to quickly recap a couple of experiences. Overall, and I think you guys maybe have felt it, and tell me if you haven't, but I've been feeling great. That fulfillment that I was wondering, where do these people get that? I've actually been feeling it now and been feeling it relatively consistently. I'm not saying that there's no anxiety ever, but the amount is way reduced. There was maybe a little anxiety last night at midnight as what seemed like armed gunmen were walking by me. But at the end of the day, here's the cool thing about really getting your arms around this. It's a scary thing to mention, but it almost eliminates your fear of death.
Yeah.
I will throw a caveat in, and if the people upstairs are listening, I would much prefer to go in my sleep than to be, burned at the stake.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I think that is one of the most powerful elements of being a real believer is you actually understand that not only is death something to not fear, it's, this might sound morbid and upside down, but it's almost something to welcome. Do you understand?
Yeah, and it's there's a philosophical element to that that's kind of strange too. It's human nature, and this speaks to the miracle of consciousness that we know we are us, right? Is that out of all the things in life, the one thing that's absolutely 100% imminent is that you will die someday, right? We know this. There's no getting around it. This physical life will end. So that, excuse me. So the hang-up over it philosophically is strange. Because, you could be nervous about a job interview or a court case or, am I going to be late to this meeting? Because you don't really know. But we all know we're going to die someday. We don't know when, but we all know it. So the hang-up about it is a little bit strange from a philosophical standpoint.
No, I think that's a very good point.
It's an excellent point.
I mean, we all know it.
Yeah.
So it's
where
not
are
like
you
it's
guys on that Richter scale of, let's just call it the fear of the death of our human bodies? Is this something you guys have completely embraced and you're fine with? Are you still trying to get there? Kat, Howard, where do you guys see yourselves?
Less fearful than I used to be, but not completely comfortable with the concept.
Oh, let's be honest. I don't want to die.
Yeah,
I'm not inviting it. I do cool stuff all the time. So there's that part that's still attached to this world, of course. But if I was faced with it today versus even 5 years ago, my reaction internally would be completely different. It would be completely different.
Is there anything someone could ever do, say, or threaten that would get you to renounce what you believe in right now?
No way. Nothing.
I say the same thing. I also recognize easier said than done. If someone's lighting your feet on fire, I hope I have what it takes to stay. You don't need to test me on that one, Lord.
Yeah, no,
Just so you know.
Yeah. For me, though, I've seen enough to where there's no way you could get me to renounce it. Doesn't matter what you do. Because there's always an answer to any scenario that would possibly come up. Name one. And the most abhorrent situation you could think of, there's always a safety net that God provides. So I've seen enough truth in that book, dissected it enough, and there's more. I'll spend my entire life, as long as God gives me breath, studying this, and I will always learn more. I know this. But I've seen enough and proved enough on paper that it's absolutely true. There's just no two ways around it. There's no alternative.
Agreed. I've now seen enough and still haven't. I doubt I've read every word in that book even now, although I'm on my second one. You guys see when I read, I'm marking it up like I'm a schizoid patient in a psycho ward with arrows and points, and I think that process will continue because there is so many layers of understanding in that book. It's not something and this is one of the things I wanted to bring up, which came out with Nick. It's something that even now, between all of us, we're somewhere between a couple years to 7 years into really diving into this thing. And some of the things I noticed of the most well-oiled Bible teachers out there, like the Chuck Misslers, they study, or the Derek Princes. I mean, they never stop studying it. I mean, some of them are going on 20, 30, 40 years before, and I'm sure God has a lot to do with this, before their audience starts to grow as they start to get it more. I think that kind of goes hand in hand. So I'm with you. I don't think a 120-year lifespan is enough to ever learn everything that's in there.
No. In fact, it's fascinating enough just taking it in the English language. When you start tearing into the Hebrew and the Greek, it adds a whole, well, not just a layer, but I would say an infinite amount of layers to it, that you could study this for 100 years and still have more to learn, because it's not a man-made document. People penned it, but it's clearly supernatural in nature. So it's got more dimensions than the two that are on the page.
Clearly, I believe that. Why do you say that?
Because from studying things like number patterns, the impossibilities of prophecies coming true, the way that they use the Hebrew language to structure certain things. I mean, you could do a year of shows about this kind of stuff. And you'll hear people call it talk about like Bible codes. And I'm not talking about the punching stuff into a computer Bible codes. I'm talking about the things that are in the ancient manuscripts that computers can't even reproduce. I mean, it's really quick example. I believe it's the last 12 verses in the book of Mark. It's just 12 verses. The patterns of 7 that appear in those 12. And the correlations between that book and the other books, by the way, adds a whole other layer to this. In the English and in the Greek and figuring in gematria, which is numerical values of letters and words, they basically crunched the numbers on it. A scribe didn't just make this up in some cave somewhere because he was up to something, because it would take 4 million supercomputers 1 million years to accomplish that and make it make sense and correlate to the other books in a way that were written by different authors, by the way, at different times. That's just one example.
Right. I agree with that. That is one of the evidences of its supernatural nature. Many of those patterns of 7 require you to combine books that were written thousands of years apart by authors that had no contact with each other, didn't even speak the same language. And once you start to study that part of it, if you weren't impressed by predicting the future with detail before it happened, I mean, that alone got me.
That's a home run, in my opinion.
Yeah. There's only one. Whoever was behind writing it is not, they assent, in a sense, this is sound very science fiction-y, but they can time travel. Or they have,
absolutely,
they can view the future.
Absolutely transcends.
They didn't guess and get it right.
What?
He's talking about God. He's not bound by space-time.
I thought you meant the people, like the people who were writing it. I was like, back up.
Well, actually, I will also say they can too. Elijah, for instance, 900 years before Christ appears, he's an entity. Yet, on the Mount of Olives, there he is also, 900 years apart. There is some sort of time travel going on. It might not be how we see it on television.
No.
Right.
But the powers behind that book are not bound by the dimension of time.
No, they're not. It's that dimension doesn't, the 3 dimensions we all recognize every day is coupled with the 4th, which is our prison, and that's time.
Which scientists from Albert Einstein on down recognize is a malleable dimension. And there's a lot of experimentation going on with time travel.
Well, they've done this with a simple wristwatch. You get it going a certain speed, it slows down. This is also true with altitude as well. So time has physical properties that can absolutely be modified. We just haven't gotten it, and we won't be allowed to get to that point, by the way. We just won't. God won't allow it.
I don't have an opinion on that, but I tend to agree with you.
Yeah,
but I'm not.
That
100%
happens
either way.
I mean, this is conjecture on my part, but that happens, I believe, when we die.
I think there's forces at work that are trying to, again, counterfeit what God can do, and we may be more advanced in that.
It's like with
and
particle.
I'm not talking Mandela effect, but
with particle accelerators, they can't quite achieve the speed of light. Close, but not quite.
Well, we have broken the speed of light with a Planck particle. So you get down to matter at its smallest possible unit. It's called Planck. Now, there's Planck time, there's Planck matter. It applies to several different forms of either energy or mass.
And even distance as well.
So what you've got is the concept of quantum entanglement, where, and I think this has a lot to do with why Satan exists, but for every positive, there's a negative. And even down at the submolecular level, you've got this concept called quantum entanglement, where there's a positively charged...
We've done this with protons.
So I might not be using the right terminology, but you'll have a positively charged proton and its mate, which is negatively charged. You can separate those by thousands of miles, which should take, 0.5 seconds, some small amount of time for information to travel back and forth at the speed of light. But what they've found is that if you change the polarity, once you've separated these two particles that were married, if you change the polarity of one, the polarity of the other, instantaneously, information is somehow being moved faster than the speed of light. Now, we can only do that with one single atom, but we have proven that the speed of light is not the fastest force. I don't know if that's a force, but it is not the speed limit of God.
No, it's our speed limit.
It is. And, let's say if an animal is blind and can't see, all they can do is hear. What's their speed limit? The speed of sound? What other senses are out there that we don't have access to right now? There must be some, because obviously time and the speed of light these are kind of like human limiters. Although if you look up just Google quantum particles and quantum entanglement, it's not as complicated as you think. Proves speed of light is not the fastest thing that we know of. So any comments on any of that so far?
Well, I was going to answer your question that you asked.
Which one?
The first one.
All right,
Howard.
let's hear it.
I was just making some notes. You were talking about struggling with salvation, right? Basically. And I think I finally am starting to understand where this struggle comes from. First of all, the Bible tells us to work our salvation out with fear and trembling. Okay. And there's a paradox, it seems to be a paradox between Romans 10:9, which says, if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that he raised from the dead, you're saved. John 3:16, anyone who believes will have eternal life, all that stuff. But then we read verses like, the following kinds of people are not going to enter the kingdom of heaven. The liars, the drunk, and I think every person in this room maybe starts to form beads of sweat on their forehead when they see that and when they hear that. And I think the confusion, and I need to, pray about this more and study this more. I think there's a confusion between being saved and actual discipleship and actually being a disciple. And I think that verse in Matthew that terrifies every Christian to their very soul, the one that says, Lord, Lord, right?
Not everyone who
says, Lord, Lord will enter the kingdom of heaven, and
scariest words I think you could ever hear
exactly,
in your existence.
Exactly. And what I think, I always took those words to mean, I think I'm doing all these things, I'm not swearing as much, I'm not doing this, and I'm watching this, and blah, blah, blah. And it hit me. I think someone like that is going to be the one that's not going to enter the kingdom of heaven, because that's works. There's a difference between, if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and you believe in your heart he rose from the dead, you're saved, and count the cost of following me. There's a difference. And I think that that's what sanctification is. I think our time here on earth, we are being sanctified to be his disciples. I don't know if disciples is the right word in heaven. We're supposed to be co-heirs. Or maybe there is a hierarchy in heaven. And maybe belief, like genuine belief Jesus was Lord, is enough to get to heaven, but it's not enough for something else that's up there. I don't know, because you add anything more to that, and you're creating, you got to do something. Jesus never said you have to do this to keep your salvation, right?
That's right.
So
but it gets a little layered, but I don't think it's quite so complicated, really. You have the Bema Seat judgment, and basically, you're right. There is a hierarchy. It's spelled out, actually, and there will be people that will rule, crowned kings and queens of nations.
Right.
When the millennial reign, right? When Jesus is king here for real and all of this. But like when you I don't know why that passage frightens Christians so much, because a liar is somebody who just lies and doesn't care.
I think now that I'm processing all this information this way, I think a liar is someone who says Jesus is not Lord.
Well, that's blaspheming the Holy Spirit, and you are not going to be forgiven for that.
Right, that's true.
So then you're toast as far as that's concerned.
Right.
But that's the only thing you won't. That's not forgivable. Is that is
I think
But okay, right there though. How do you square what you just said up with the following people will not enter my kingdom? If you're a liar, if you're a drunkard, if you're this, if you're that, and at what point does telling a lie here and there make you not a liar? Or does getting drunk on occasion not make you a drunkard?
It depends on. It depends on.
Trying to be argumentative.
No, but these are really good questions, because I just lost the left part of my headphone. Anyway, because these are questions people ask, and they're fair questions, because it could seem to be worrisome, but I try to simplify it a little bit, because if again, we will never be free of sin. I don't care how quote unquote saved you are.
Right.
It doesn't matter, because we can't get out of it. It is our condition.
Right.
But there is this thing called remorse, this thing called repentance. And if you do a wrong, like say you're stuck in a situation and you lie to somebody thinking it was the right thing to do.
Right.
A liar. Now, we would have to break down the Greek in this instance to see what it's really saying, because a lot of it's lost in English.
Right.
But in my mind anyway, it would be someone who just lies without remorse, and they're like a pathological liar,
right,
and doesn't think it's wrong.
Right, or justifies it somehow in their head.
Of course.
Right. Okay, so going along with that thought, if you said, okay, as long as you have remorse, so you're repentant. So are you saying that if, let's say I told you a big stinker lie, and then when I got home, I was like beating myself up about it, completely convicted, right? And I confessed to you, and then I confessed to God. Do I have to confess that to God? Because the moment I proclaimed the Lord as my Savior, I was washed, everything past, present, and future. So what does it mean to be repentant? You're constantly repenting. You're constantly asking forgiveness.
Yeah.
That doesn't square up with your sins are removed as far as the east is from the west.
It does square up, and here's
How?
why. Because if they weren't washed, he would just burn us all up right now. There would be no grace and no mercy.
I think this is where our metaphors are going to come in really, really handy. And I'm going to use something you just said to transition us into our first one to get this ball rolling. I wanted to finish up with two things, just to mention them. I've done 2 fasts since we started fasting. Do you have a mic problem?
No, it's just my headphone. I'm fine.
Okay. The first one, I felt physically better than I had in decades. I kind of backed into a second one, which here's all I want to say about this, because I've been pretty open about my relationship with my ex over the last few years. Something happened that I've been praying for, and there is no doubt in my mind this has the hand of God written all over it. Because God started moving in my life. Now I recognize it. I recognize the feeling. And I've thrown this date out a million times. It was February 14th of 2011. That's when he got me to start looking into 9/11, which led to God. There was an ongoing, let's call it an ongoing battle. And I'd actually used the name of Betsy, my ex, as who it was I was battling with. And I have a few things to say about this. And I think she's listening, so I hope everything I'm about to say I absolutely believe with my heart. Something changed in her heart this week. And she did something that was beyond wonderful. That absolutely, in my mind, completely reconciled us. I mean, as good as we could ever be reconciled. You still can't put the toothpaste back in the toothpaste tube. You know, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. But she made a gesture, and I knew I was talking to a sincere. You know what it is I knew I was talking to the real girl, the real Betsy underneath. Now, here's the part where it took me, even after knowing God is real, this part took me a while to get to. Because somewhere a couple years ago, I realized that I wasn't, Betsy and I would have some really big fights. But I actually realized I was not fighting with Betsy. And if you take Ephesians 6:12 literally, what does it say?
Put on the armor of God.
No, we don't wrestle.
Oh.
We're not wrestling with flesh and blood. Like when we're fighting, we're not fighting with other people. What are we really doing? We're fighting. We're wrestling with demons. That is what principalities and powers and for me, there are things that we can do to our bodies in our life that open up pathways for these guys. I have absolutely witnessed it, where we'd reach a point where I felt like I was talking to just a different person, just not the sweet girl I know in the daytime. It was I felt like I was dealing with a different, literally an entity. And even at this table, even if you're a solid Christian, you got demons in you. A third of the host of heaven fell. I mean, and we're talking at least 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands and thousands. Now, depending how you do the math on that, we could be talking about multiple billions to hundreds of millions of demons that are inhabiting this world. And I personally suspect the number is in the billions. And we do things that we let them into our lives. They're whispering in our ears in their own little way. And the more I look at the Bible, the more black and white I take it, the more it seems to be it's less mythological and metaphorical. The more I look at it, it is actually much more precise every time I study it more deeply. And I really do believe at the end of the day, a lot of our problems, and a lot of the problems in our life, because we have these, it seems to go in waves where all of a sudden 10 people in our life seem to all of a sudden be coming at us at the same time. And I don't think that's random, nor do I think that is a human only. I actually think that there is some coordination on some level in the demonic world where this stuff hits in waves. And this is one of the things I don't believe I've conveyed that to Betsy, for instance. But it sure took a lot of pressure off us, even going back as far as 2 years ago, when I at least started to believe it, because I wasn't really fighting with her anymore. I was fighting with something that was in her that wanted to stop me from doing what I'm doing, which is speaking about God. And I think that happens in this world much more than we realize. And it makes it a lot easier to divide the human person you love away from the influences that are in them. And all I'm going to say is I have been praying, not for the outcome of what happened this week, but I have been praying for God to shake her. I'm not saying this from a position of, I've got my salvation all worked out. I am afraid still. We're going to dig into that through some of these metaphors of human institutions. So don't think I'm talking like some wise old sage here. If I'm using the kindergarten through 12 example, I'm just like a fifth grader on the team of people that is helping, bring on the third and fourth graders that are going to be at middle school next. I'm still learning myself, and I have a long way to go. So understand where I'm coming from. But to believe that I was really dealing with two separate entities, that I was wrestling not with a human, but I was wrestling with the influences in that it cleared up. And it really allows the love you have for other people to just come through. And if there's ever a day where I could show her, I mean, there is one passage, and there are many, many passages that would back this up. Even sicknesses that we attribute to seizures or epilepsy or whatever, if you really look at the symptoms and you believe what's written in the Bible, those were all caused by demonic possession. I don't like that term but I guess the preferred term is demonization. We all have a certain level of it. And I don't know if this is the litmus test, but the more light you have in you, and God is light, the less darkness that can possibly exist. And at some point, if all of God, which is a light so bright that there would be no shadow, I mean, shadows would just disappear in this room. So if you're thinking about how we reconcile ourselves to God and why he might not he has to actually go through a bunch of protocols just to be able to get Moses to be near him. And Moses still walks out of this face-to-face meeting with his face glowing, and it's like he just walked out of a radiation room. Because at the end of the day, it's not that God is mean or cruel, but the simple fact that he is pure light, pure good. A shadow cannot exist in a room in which that type of light is. It will extinguish itself. And that might be what God is trying to prevent, because that darkness crept into humanity with Adam, and it has it is our rebellious nature. And the other piece of the equation is that also opened up pathways for these cast off, whatever you want to call them, demons, fallen angels, disembodied spirits, I don't know. But it's certainly biblical, if you believe the Bible, that they absolutely can inhabit humans and control their behavior. Absolutely. Any doubt there from you guys?
No way.
Okay.
That they actually
None.
have to. That is
Okay.
that is their.
You believe that Christians can be
Christians
demon-possessed?
are demonized. Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe more.
Yeah. Sometimes they're under attack even more.
They're going to.
There's a difference between being possessed and being under attack.
Well,
There's a huge difference.
Well, possession isn't even really in the Bible. The word is
because the house divided will not stand.
Yeah, the word is mistranslated. It's not possession. It's demonized, and that's more like being affected. And I believe that there are areas of our lives, even though we're Christian and we believe, no doubt, that we're not in control of 100%. A good example would be smoking. Clearly, I'm convinced this is totally demonic, and it is a way for demons to enter. Now, not exorcist demons, not like
Right.
Hollywood.
Get that image out of your head.
But
that's not how they operate.
No, but it does have an effect. It has an effect from something as simple as self-esteem. It has an effect as simple as disappointment.
It has an effect that they will make you feel confident that you are on the right path with God when you're absolutely not.
Well, and in the long run, it's meant to destroy you, which is their MO. That is their only purpose, is your and my destruction. And they'll do it however they can. And I think to get, and this is what we're trying to accomplish, is to eliminate all those pathways. I mean, this even includes thoughts. So this is where it gets very, very difficult to be a human being, because if even your thoughts are sin, which they are, then it poses a very difficult problem, which is why I trust implicitly that it is clearly grace and mercy that is what allows us to exist.
Two examples I've got firsthand. I'm the son of an alcoholic. I'm the brother of someone that struggles with the same thing. I struggled with it myself for a few years. I know it changes you. And when people drink, for instance, they're not in the mood to go to church. I mean, what is it that they want to do? They want to have sex. They want to get in fights. They want an
drink
excuse
more.
Yeah. Now, when I used to read that in the Bible, I'm like, oh, well, God's no fun. God says no tattoos, for instance. And it's interesting to then now be able to do research on the internet where you find out what witches and covens do with the blood that is drawn in tattoo parlors, and that this is actually used in demonic rituals. And at the end of the day, all these things God says don't do. It's not because he's a doily-wearing teetotaler. All of it is for our safety, whether it's on an individual level or across all of humanity. I haven't traced all of, he's got hundreds of commandments at the end, if you want to look at it like that. I haven't traced them all, so I can't say this with any kind of authority right now. But just on those two examples, I feel very confident of. I know when I'm drinking, I'm liable to do stuff that I would never do sober, that I know God absolutely does not like.
Yeah, it's like, Dave, what are you doing right now? Even just what you say is different. You've heard this. Oh, he's a mean drunk, right? Or he's happy drunk. Or that automatically infers a personality change.
Exactly. That means something.
Alcohol lowers your inhibitions. It affects your coordination. It
Right.
impairs your judgment.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, those are the scientific effects of alcohol on your body.
So I'm having this conversation with Nick on Saturday night, and we're getting close to a break here. And the last thing I want to say is at one point in this conversation, we almost literally got into a fight.
Totally not
No.
shocking. Totally not shocking.
I wasn't shocked either.
You know what, though? We both learned something huge from this. And this will tie into these metaphors we're going to talk about. But for both Nick and me, the fact that we're raising our voices about a topic that at the end of the day we're neophytes about proved to me, and I had to sit down and acknowledge this with Nick, and I apologized to him. I'm like, you just showed me that my ego is still involved in here somewhere.
Yeah.
Because if you really remove pride in your ego, you should never get upset talking about the Word of God. It only to the extent that someone you care about may lose their salvation. But to argue whether this passage means this or this passage means that, where in the K through 12 example, imagine a couple of second graders arguing over what 12 times 12 is. And you can imagine, we've got kids that are that age. I
think I've had this argument with
I've had
a first grader before.
Exactly. So. God is not looking for the second grader to know what 12 times 12 is. He's not, if we're in the second grade of our understanding, let's say.
I'm following you.
And I don't know where we are. All I know is I'm nowhere near graduation. I think I'm out of kindergarten, which is where we all start, and somewhere in between there. I'm moving along here, and I'm just sharing the experience as we go. And I was just thinking, if I'm a teacher, or if I'm the boss, and I've got examples. I've been the CEO of several companies where I've got hundreds of employees underneath me, and yes, there's an employee manual with rules. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the types of relationships employees have with their boss. And I'm going to tie it together to the different types of Christians we see. There's the guy that rolls into the boss's office, total trust. The guy does his job. He kicks his feet up on the table. They have a relationship. There's also these employees that are so intimidated by the boss, they change their language around them. They might swear at their cubicle, but when the boss walks around, they suddenly sit up straight. They change the screen that's on their computer. They make things appear different than what they really are. And believe me, bosses notice this stuff. And if I can notice it on a human level, God does. Maybe this is the kind of lying he's talking about. We're going to go into some examples with that. Are we at a decent time to take a break?
We are.
Can we just do it now?
We can absolutely do it.
Why don't we take a break? We're going to talk about why the U.S. Army puts ads on television, for instance, to recruit the whole world, but the minute you sign up, now they start to weed you out. Does that make sense? We're going to talk about a few examples like that and how that might tie to getting to heaven.
Interesting.
When we come back.
Welcome back to Down the Rabbit Hole. Dave's got I'm going to let Dave continue with his topic. He's said some real interesting things to think about on this show. So just going to turn the mic over to Hoops and let him take us back into it.
So one of the things I wanted to close out from the first hour, I told you guys when, I didn't know it at the time, it would take me another 8 months to realize God was doing something in my life. But on February 14th of 2011, that is without a doubt the day God started moving in my life, I talked about this unbelievable reconciliation that I had with Betsy. And the letter that she wrote that was a part of this reconciliation was dated February 14th, 2018, 7 years to the day. And God uses those patterns of 7, not just with individuals, but with nations, with tribes, and with world history, with the feasts of the Hebrews, and on and on and on. And that's not the only reason. But to me, again, there are no coincidences. There was something supernatural going on. And I think, to some extent, my prayers were answered. Not because of the material outcomes of that reconciliation, but because I have been praying, and this was what I was getting at. I'm no expert here, okay? I'm just still rowing the boat right now. But you do have an idea of who's down with God and who's not by talking to them. And if you really believe in heaven and hell, and you really believe, souls go somewhere, that is, I think, why we do what we do. We do it for free. We'd be doing it for free if it, any way you slice it, because at the end of the day, whether you want to call it selling heaven, discussing heaven and God, whatever, it is the only product, let's call it that, just to start using some human terms. It's the only product that can be sold on earth that has everlasting value. Everything else, every CAD design, every print, every website, every radio station, all of it's going to burn. Yeah. All of it's going to go bye-bye.
Yeah, it's a better investment than real estate.
And it does pay off. It really does.
It does. Yeah, because real estate, even though they're not, quote-unquote, making any more of it, it's all going to go away anyway.
Especially on the coastlines, right?
But you're right. We do it for free, and we do it constantly. And you do get to a point where, at least for me personally, where you instantly recognize it. And if it's not instantly, it's very soon after. Where something, you recognize, you look at the world completely different. You look
completely different.
You look at interactions with people totally different. And
there are things I would scratch my head about for hours in the past.
Right.
Now I look at it, I was like, oh yeah, got it. Satan, his minions. Yep, gotcha.
Here's an example of how much, and you guys will relate to this, how much things have changed for me as a person. So I'm at Sam's Club grocery shopping, and they have a booth set up for a home improvement place, remodeling, gutters, siding. Sam's Club does this stuff. And they have a couple of dudes standing there trying to get you to, Well, it just so happens I kind of need some work done on my gutters anyway. So he's like, you looking at any home improvements, in the near future? And I said, well, not really, dude. He's like, nothing, He's like, you don't need anyone looking at your gutters? And I'm like, actually, you know what? I do, actually. We got some issues going on, blah, blah, blah. So we got to talking, and to make a long story short, my answer to this kid, he was a young 20-something kid, nice kid, really nice kid. I ended up spending 45 minutes talking to him. We got on the subject of, he's taking my info, are you married, blah, blah, blah. I said, yeah, how long you been married? 10 years. He's like, wow, man. He's like, that's awesome. He's like, I just got engaged. And a little bit kind of, it's a big deal. Do you have any advice on how to make it work. Like, you guys have been together 10 years, and he's like, is it good? I said, dude, it's the most phenomenal. I can't even put words to it, how awesome it's been. He says, do you have any advice on how do you accomplish that? I said, the answer to that is so simple that when I say it, you're either going to think I'm a lunatic or you already know the answer to it. So here goes. I said, what you guys need to do as a couple is you need to start evaluating your belief in God and specifically Jesus Christ. And I said, the reason why I say that is because you're a man and she's a woman. You guys are already different enough by nature. If you don't have something bigger in your lives that you answer to besides each other, it will never really work. You can make it work, and you can force it, and you can go to marriage counseling and all these head shrinks and have kids to try to put Band-Aids on the leaks in the dike. But the fact of the matter is, if you have something like that and a real belief, because it's true if you look into it, you can prove that that book's true. No doubt. People will say,
that is like the big. That's one
there's
of
no
the
doubt.
big. But for 42 years, I thought it was impossible to prove.
Well, that was ridiculous.
But that actually is kind of a little bit of brainwashing. You can actually
absolutely prove it.
But you got to seek.
And I told him that, and I said, and he actually was really receptive to it. Now, my answer years ago would not have been that.
I think it would have been a little different.
Oh, I would have. I don't know if I would have had an answer. I'd have been like, I don't know, man. All women are crazy. There's no way to really make it work. You just got to get lucky and find a decent one, I guess. I don't know. That would have been crappy advice, right? But that was my answer to this kid, and we ended up spending. I gave him. He ended up with a sheet of paper full of notes by the time we were done talking. Serious. I turned him on to Hooper's YouTube page, our website.
Nice.
Dropped names like Chuck Missler, Trey Smith, et cetera, et cetera. Check out our radio show and all this stuff. And I said, so instead of watching YouTube videos of, squirrels surfing, which I know we all do.
Squirrels surfing are awesome.
Take a minute and look into this guy named Jesus Christ. You have to ask yourself two questions. How is it that a guy that was literally nobody remains the most famous human being that's ever lived, and people 2,000 years after his death are still willing to die instead of saying he's not real?
So either there's a ton of crazy people, or there's a ton of people who learned something.
They got it. And hopefully, who knows? But that's the difference. Now, that answer came off my sleeve like it was nothing. And there's people around and other people he worked with, and they're all listening, and no one said a word. Just him and I talking. But it's like it was instantly like, this is the time to tell this kid. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It wasn't. There was no apprehension. There was no like, oh, maybe I'm in a public place. It's kind of embarrassing. None of that. I was just like, dude, this is what you got to do, dude. Flat out. There's no doubt about this. I said, maybe I'm crazy, but you've been talking to me now for. I'm not a crazy person, But you do instantly. You get to a point where you do instantly recognize these things. And what you said before the break was so spot on accurate. Where, say you get in a tiff with somebody or an argument at work, or something goes wrong. I almost always now take just a step back and analyze and go, okay, what's going on here? And that outlook, you're right. It even people that I used to despise, I actually care about. It's really a strange dynamic, but it's for real.
Yeah, tying the dates together. I mean, that the love for God that I saw other people have that I didn't have, because my relationship with him up until about October of last year was just intellectual. But I feel like that has gone into the stratosphere. And your point about this kid. See, if Jesus is not who he said he was, there's no harm in what we're... Now, this is not why we do what we do.
Right.
But you can't go wrong. However, if Jesus is who he said he was, there can be nothing more important you can ever do with your existence than to figure that out. Nothing.
Right.
And no matter how lousy your life has been, no matter what problems you have on earth, you can make this life a success by figuring that out. And the other side of that coin is, no matter how wealthy you are or how wonderful things you've had it, if you don't figure that out, your life on earth is a failure. And I mean personal, on a catastrophic / tragic, permanent level. And, people spend more time planning out their 401ks and their vacation next year, typically, than they do about their permanent vacation, which is not a logical thing. And if you think about that, you must understand that there is some kind of brainwashing at work here, because just the 0.00001% chance that heaven and hell are real, if you're a logical person, considering the risk and reward of not looking, if you don't look into it, the risk
the risk is through the roof. And it's the brainwashing. It can be something that seems actually kind of cool. A good example is the book and movie The Da Vinci Code. You guys saw that movie, maybe read the book, Dan Brown.
I read both the books, yeah.
Well, that has led even Christians into buying complete heresy, blasphemy, actually. And it's written with the preface that much of it's true. There was deliberate deception, because the guy knew it wasn't true and said it was, some certain things. And actually led a whole line of beliefs that there's something maybe even more incredible than the incredible story that already is the real story, by making you think that the Holy Grail is the lineage because Jesus was actually married, Mary Magdalene heresy, which the Mormon Church actually accepts. See how deep this can go with brainwashing. But it was a cool movie. It was a well-written book.
Very well written.
You don't get brainwashed by watching one movie. But what is coming through on the Da Vinci Code comes in through just about every news program, every television program, very softly, almost undetectable. The way they portray Christians, the way they make their belief system seem wacky. You're not even noticing it unless you're hyper alert to this.
Right.
But that is where the...
Well, look at the... you could see this in the movie reviews at the time. So, Dan Brown, okay, in an upside-down world that we live in, where, this brainwashing... Movie critics even supported this brainwashing because Dan Brown was getting accolades. Masterful piece of work. Should be required reading. All these great... you can go back and see all the reviews of the book and how awesome it is. Mel Gibson makes The Passion of the Christ. And whether you're even a believer or not, is a fabulous movie. That movie's so well done. It's fantastic.
They're wrapping up Passion of the Christ too.
I cannot wait for it. But that movie is a fantastic movie. All self-funded. Put his neck out on the line to even make that movie, and movie critics were calling him a bigot and attacking him for literally just making a historical movie. And you see the upside down. So the lies and the heresy and the blasphemy get accolades and on how awesome it is. But something that was actually accurate to ancient script, whether you're a believer or not, right? So you see how it goes. So when people will read this, and then they may not even watch Mel Gibson's movie because of it, so they don't even get Jesus' story from that.
I'll bet you that movie has brought... Look, I had no relationship with God, no real true belief that Jesus was necessarily the Son of God, and that doesn't really even come out in the movie so much.
No, it doesn't.
But I remember crying. I was a grown man crying, and I'll bet you that movie has brought more people to God than maybe any other movie in history.
Because I tried to backtrack, right? I tried to look back on my life and figure out the moment in time where the door was opened to listen to God. And I believe it was when I went and saw that movie. Because I went and saw it when it was in the theaters with a Catholic friend of mine and his priest buddy.
Oh, yeah, you told
invited me to go see it because he knew I was a total heathen, dude. Because I was a bad guy. I was not doing good things. or thinking good things or reading good things, or everything about me was upside down. And this guy knew it, but he still was my friend and invited me to go. And I'm like, you know what, dude, I'll go. Why not? Who's going? He's like, my buddy who's a priest. I'm like, all right, let's go, dude. Fine, I'll go. Why not? And that movie had such profound effect on me that I remember on the drive home, because I was by myself, I never understood really the purpose for Jesus dying on the cross. I never really quite got it. But that movie made me somehow instantly understand it. And I kind of ignored it for years after that. But I believe that was the moment in time. That movie absolutely opened up the door for me to start being more receptive, pay more attention. It took a really long time, but I don't know that I would have been, as I think that's true for millions of people that have seen that movie. It definitely had an effect. It's such a good movie.
So let's use that to morph into what we were talking about. And let's kind of just focus on two of these metaphors. Institutions just about every human, certainly every American's familiar with. Because most of us work, so we've been in a business. Many of us have joined the military. We understand that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the business side because that's just where most of my experience is. And I will throw out the disclaimer once again. This is my personal commentary and my thoughts to date of how God might really be viewing what our relationship is. Because, and correct me if I say anything that you guys don't agree with, but God is looking for a relationship with us, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what he wants.
I believe he says it. He practiced it, beginning with Moses. Moses was negotiating on behalf of the Israelites in the desert. Later on, Abraham's negotiating with God about what he might do with Sodom and Gomorrah and a few other cities, and on and on and on.
Well, you can sum it up by they all refer to him as Father. That just denotes a relationship. So,
very good point. So, I'm going to put on my CEO hat right now, and I've gone through a few businesses, sold some. I had some go down the toilet. I've been able to see, probably in my life, I've recruited somewhere between 500 and 1,000 people at the end of the day, personally recruited that ended up working for my company. And then observed them. So the metaphor here is God, the creator, is the chairman of the board. All right? He's in control of the ship. That's where the decisions are made, and that's usually where the ownership is. It's in that boardroom. Jesus, and I'm not trying to bring Jesus down to like just a CEO here, but in this metaphor, Jesus is the CEO of the company. Now I'm going to share some experiences I've had with people. And you tell me if you can draw some parallels between Christians and other people we view out in the world versus some of these experiences that I'm sure you guys have also witnessed on both sides of this equation, both as employees and as the boss. So in the first hour we were talking about, Catherine brought up, am I considered a drunkard if I drink? Am I, it's the rules-oriented portion. And in any organization, there's got to be rules. If God is running a just company, if this company is just, I am going to require everyone that enters the business and becomes part of the team to go through some hurdles. The U.S. Army does the exact same thing. As a business owner or as a military officer, it is not in your best interest or the organization's best interest at all. In fact, it's actually destructive to an organization if I were suddenly to bring in a group of people that had not jumped through the same hoops and earned their way in, and suddenly gave them equal or even greater status than the ones that are already there or that did it properly. Now, a lot of people are pinning their salvation that God will do just that, even though he's gone way out of his way to say, that is exactly what I will not do. So we know he likes to negotiate. We know he likes relationship. Now, as a CEO, I'll tell you this. The kind of employee that I loved was, I'm going to tell you the kind of employee I loved, and then I'm going to give you some examples of other ones I put up with, and then other ones that I fired. And I'll tell you this. Every employee I've fired, except for one in my life, was very surprised they got fired. They didn't see it coming in spite of the dozen warnings I gave them. Not because I'm a mean, draconian boss, but because I cared about them. And I was invested in them. I didn't want to see that. I knew the trouble they would face if they lose their income and they don't have a job anymore, because I know they have a family. And do you understand?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because we may have the image of a CEO as some dude up in an ivory tower barking orders, but the reality is, if you're a good boss, if you're a good general, you are mixing it with your people, whether it's the janitor, whether it's your entry-level people, whether it's your senior sales level executives. You, at least for me, I wanted to know these people. So the kind of guy that I loved is a guy who, or girl, who I knew their heart was in it, and I knew they were loyal to me. Now, did I expect them? You know, the employee manual says you're allowed 3 sick days and you're allowed a week's vacation. You know, there's rules in there, okay? Now, do you think an employee that I had a great relationship with, who's a producer and spreads goodwill, helps me get my vision as the CEO out to other employees, do you think I'm just going to fire them if they're late one day 5 minutes? Do you think I'm going to fire them if they need to take an extra 3 days off because they had a family emergency? I mean, maybe there's some companies out there like that. I can tell you, no, I never would have.
Right, no.
This is the kind of person that we didn't just work together, but there was a friendship, a true friendship. We might even have socialized together. My best employees would not be afraid to come into my office and say, Dave, we need to sit down and talk. There's a problem with XYZ, or I need help with this, or what's your advice about that? There was also, not that I needed to manufacture this artificially, but there was also respect there. Like, I could tell the employees that respected me versus the ones that didn't. I've had experiences, for instance, where two examples. And I think I might have even talked about one of them. Superstar sales guy. Cocky. His name was always top on the board, okay, on the sales list. Brought in a lot of money. And that gave him this false sense of security, okay? I've also had employees that might not have been as a good producer, but I knew they were trying their butts off. And as an example, if the superstar employee might have been late 10 minutes or something like that, not that I would have ever made a deal out of 10 minutes, but just metaphor here. I've gotten the attitude of essentially, F you if I'm 5 minutes late. I had to take care of some stuff. That is just, too bad. I'm late. What are you going to do? Fire me? You need me. I've also had people that are, when they're late, the good guys, they pop their head in. It's almost out of respect. And my employees, by the way, I wanted them to call me Dave. It made me uncomfortable when they called me Mr. Hooper, for instance. And I'd say, they'd pop in and go, Dave, I'm totally sorry I was late today. I just, frankly, I woke up late. My alarm didn't go off. I got held up at the train. Sorry about that. I'm going to get back to work, if that's all right with you. And immediately done, taken care of. Both these guys broke the same rule. But my reaction to them is very different because their hearts are in different places. And at the end of the day, what is God always talking about? What's in your heart? I had employees, for instance, and I think this has a lot to do with God, and this is where you work your salvation out with fear and trembling to a point. Someone starts at my company, and right now all they know is our only relationship is this. They were maybe hired by me or hired by my HR recruiting staff, and I could tell some of them were incredibly nervous around me. Like the minute I'd start walking the floor, to greet my people like I always do, I'd notice, some of them turning off some of their websites, turning on others. Their tones of voice, which they'd start to speak in a more formal language. They were altering who they were, trying to please what they thought I was looking for. When in reality, what I was looking for was the real them. Now, any boss knows that, I had employees, for instance, that might take some supplies home. If you own a bar, you can count on 10 to 20% of your revenue kind of being pocketed. I had people take paper clips home, use my stamp machine for personal mail, things of that nature. What I call those like minor, let's call them sins, whatever. Not worth getting fired over as a one-time act. But if I brought it up, I'm like, hey, Jamie, we really can't have you using, at the end of the day, I don't really care about the 40 cents for a stamp. But if everyone starts using that stamp machine for their personal mail because they're seeing your personal mail go out and everyone starts sending their mail, all of a sudden our mailing machine runs out of money when we actually have work to do. Do you see the problem here? If you need a stamp, just come ask me. I've got a roll of them. I'll give them. It's not about the stamp. It's about go to the high-functioning sales guy. He might bring in a lot of numbers, and he might, he's the equivalent of a Christian that might know the Bible really well and be able to cite passages on the fly. But what kind of a message is he sending to the other people in the company? That it's all right to act like an ass? That's not the kind of company I want. And I've had some people, big producers, that were floored when I said, I'm cutting ties with you. Yes, you bring in a lot, but you know what? The organization was bringing in a lot before you. It is not worth the headache. Now, where that line is drawn is between you and God. Here's an example. And I've actually corrected people because I just happened to overhear things like this. New employee starts. Now, we didn't have a dress code like this, but let's just say you're supposed to wear a necktie. And the employee manual says, if you're ever going to, dress comfortably, you don't have to wear a necktie. But if you're going to see clients or there's a client coming in, you need to be dressed up. And the employee that is new, just started a month or two ago, they're still nervous, all right? This is working out salvation with fear and trembling. They really haven't met me yet. I might have passed by and shaken a hand. They haven't gotten to know me. They're still under pressure. Like if they do something wrong, they're canned. I mean, we've all had that feeling at some place.
Yeah, it's usually like probationary period.
Okay.
Right?
And I've overheard conversations where employee A, who doesn't know what the hell they're talking about, is going to employee B and instructing them for, in this hypothetical conversation, like, oh my God, you didn't wear a tie today, dude? Are you trying to get fired? Like, do you know how upset the boss is going to be over that? When in truth is, and I happened to hear this conversation. I walked out and I actually said, no, that does not upset me. The reason for the rule of the ties is if we have customers come in, I want them to wear ties. But I also said, dress comfortably when no one's coming in. And to be honest, employee A, why are you worrying about what employee B is wearing when you yourself have reports that are due on my desk a day ago, and those aren't done? That is what I need you to be worrying about. Very much how God says to us Don't worry about the speck in your neighbor's eye. Worry about the log in your own eye. And Dave, you said this. We will never be without sin. Does God says he hates drunkards. But does going out one night to have cocktails, does that disqualify you from heaven? What's your gut tell you?
No.
No. I agree with you.
There's actually, I don't think, once you come to the point where you believe, right? So now you're the loyal employee. You probably do less of that anyway because your nature changes. But I think it's pretty difficult to be outright disqualified. Like, you actually have to try.
So understand the relationship aspect. And I think this is what the majority of the New Testament is talking about, is if you have a real relationship with God, here are all these other signs that will be going on in your life. You know, you won't just have faith without works, because that's dead. If you really believe, you're going to want to do the work. It's not a causal relationship, it's a correlation. So we'd have a company party, let's say, and yes, the company policy is there's no drinking at the company. All right, I didn't want people drinking beers at their desk. But if we had a company party, I might even roll in a keg. I think Jesus even turned water into wine at one point. So obviously, it's not to him. Wine itself is not abhorrent, but the behavior reveals what's truly in your heart. And if we're having a party and there's some beers floating around, another example. We are having a company party, and it wasn't one where we rolled a keg in, although we had done that before. We're at a restaurant, and I've opened up a tab, and I just get whatever you want. Appetizers, drinks, whatever. It was in my mind, if you want to have cocktails, have cocktails. And I overheard one employee. It was almost like a little, one person gave another person a slap on the wrist, like, you're drinking in front of the boss? Are you crazy? What are you doing? Like, are you trying to get yourself fired? Where actually, I wanted them to just enjoy themselves. And the employee that was in the wrong was the one kind of stifling the celebration, stifling the ability to have a relationship by worrying about the rules. It says in the employee manual, no drinks at XYZ Corporation that is owned by this guy. You know? And that is where I see, and especially with neophyte Christians, because for a long while, up until October of last year, that is where something broke through for me. It was like the completing of basic training in the Army, where all of a sudden you realize, oh, okay, now I'm a commissioned officer. Yes, I still need to have respect for senior officers. I can't be a derelict. But all of these fears and tests that these drill sergeants were putting us through were just that. Just tests to prove, where's our heart? Where's our Constitution? Are we made of the material that the U.S. Army wants? You could say to anyone joining basic training, if you want to be in the Army, you can be in it. We can all be saved. But if a guy leaves basic training and doesn't come back, is he going to get into the Army?
Well, no.
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 I had another employee, mediocre producer. But he brought so much goodwill that he raised everybody's level of performance up a notch. And you can usually tell the difference between sincere respect and adoration and BS respect and adoration.
Yeah, pretty quick, too.
Right.
There are guys that would come into my office almost every day. Mr. Hooper, Edwin, I said, call me Dave. Yes, sir, Mr. Hooper, I will call you Dave. I just want to say how appreciative I am for this opportunity. No one would have given me this opportunity, whatever the reason. My wife baked you a pie. Share it with your family if you'd like. It's just our way of saying that, we are. And this guy is a hustler. He's at his capacity, and I know this. He's not going to be someone that is going to ever be the CEO of my company. But he's so gung-ho and so into it and so appreciative, it makes everyone else, it raises them up a couple of notches. Can we do something about whatever that is out there? So I then often had to deal with these super rock star employees that thought they were in good with me, but I knew they were fake. Yes, they sold a lot of stuff, but I knew when I wasn't there, what they were talking about at the water cooler was not helping, my company, my kingdom. It was a cancerous element. Many of them found themselves very surprised to get a pink slip from me. And it never came out of the blue. I'd warn them and warn them and warn them. And it just never clicked. They would take advantage of me. When they're calling off saying they're sick, I'd know they're really going to the Cubs game instead.
Yeah.
Whereas, and I used to say this to people, go, look, man, I have a life too. You're a producer here. If you want to take a Friday and take your family out to a Cubs game that starts at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, here's how you do it. Say that that's what you're going to do. Now, will I be cool with that if you do that every single Friday during the summer? Probably not. But I'll be cool with a couple of them. And I'll tell you this. What I won't be cool with is if you lie to me, because that means you don't respect me. And if I end up finding out you're at the Cubs game, or you come in the next day with you're sunburnt, you don't realize how much that has hurt you. And I will sit down and have this conversation because I want to love my employees. I want a company that wants to be there. I don't want to have people in there that are using their time trying to look for a better job, for instance. But if someone was hell-bent on getting another job, I'd actually say, look, why don't we do this? You're looking for something else. Why don't we just agree that this is what your goals are? I want to make your dreams come true. I'm fine if you want to look for another job during your lunch hour, and you can even use our computers after work if you'd like. I'll even write you a recommendation letter. Give us notice so you don't leave us in the lurch, and I will help make this happen for you. Many people, though, were too scared to do that for fear of the boss, for fear of the Lord. And you start to see some of the parallels. So when Nick and I, for instance, got into an argument over how to translate some passages, I had to catch myself. I'm like, dude, I am being like the fourth grader that's arguing with the other fourth grader over things that really neither one of us has any authority to be arguing about. Do you guys understand where I'm going?
Totally get it, yeah.
Yeah, I like the way you're laying it out. My question is how do you get to a point where you never get mad when someone is so obviously brainwashed? It still irritates me.
Irritation.
But I can honestly say that I do look at things really, really differently now, and I noticed this the other day because I kind of, you guys know me, I kind of call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
I may not necessarily come right out and get in someone's face, but I'm certainly going to make a comment to those with me or to my good friends or whatever. And how he was doing was a situation with a kid who's super annoying, and the kid is super annoying. The kid also obviously has problems. Okay, he's diagnosed ADHD. God knows if that's the problem or the medication they've put him on is actually the problem. But the kid's hyper. He's totally annoying. And so Howie was like, Howie's not super mean spirited, but he had said, that kid's annoying and this and that. And I'm like, yeah. I go, can you imagine how it must feel to be him? And Howie's like, What do you mean? What do you mean, Dad? And I'm like, well, maybe instead of just being irritated because he's kind of annoying, you should pray for him. Because imagine how hard it must be to be him. Because do you think that kid doesn't realize that every time he walks in the room, all the other kids go another direction?
Yeah.
Do you think he doesn't notice that?
Yeah.
And it was really cool because the good thing about this whole experience is that it's changing me, and I know it, and it's changing me for the better. And even if on the slight percentage that it's not true, at least the life I spend here is going to be better because of it. But more importantly than anything else, my son's life is better because of it, because I didn't have someone to point those things out to me when I was 10 years old.
Yeah, I mean,
he is literally looking at things a different way now. 3-4. I'm still a pretty nice, compassionate guy. 3-4 years ago, that kid's irritating. I would just make fun of him all the time. I mean, not like that to his face, but with how it would be a joke.
Yeah, yeah, and like you said,
and I'm serious. I mean, I literally am thinking of things in different terms now. I literally have empathy for that kid who is dealing with these problems. Where in the past I'd be like, oh God, he just walked in. All the kids are going to run away because he's annoying.
Right. Now
I feel for the kid because he's annoying, and I'm praying that whatever's going on with him gets fixed, that his parents find the right combination of whatever it takes, maybe just a hug.
Like not sorcery.
Yeah,
anyway.
Exactly. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
hijack
you're right,
it.
though,
dude, that's an awesome...
But I get where you're going with this, man, and I think it's great.
I will say one thing.
Something everyone can relate to.
There's something I'm going to throw at you just out of logic. If it irritates you that people don't see how they're brainwashed, in a sense that does not make sense, because that might...
I get it. Okay, I get it.
No, because... and this is what happened to me with Nick, is I got irritated with Nick. But I was irritated because of ego and pride that he didn't understand something that I felt I understood. The natural if the reason we're doing this is to save souls, irritation shouldn't be a word that's in the vernacular. We're either heartbroken for them, or if they're listening, it makes our day. Almost everything else in between is really a sign that we still have a little pride and ego. Like, it's the difference between... Before, I used to want people to believe me, Dave Hooper. And I'm not completely there yet, as evidenced by the fact that I raised my voice with Nick. Yeah. And I know I'm doing way better, but I'll never be there. Whereas now, instead of the litmus test being, do you believe Dave Hooper, basically the question is, well, do you believe God?
Yeah.
And I don't get it doesn't upset me anymore. It's like, look, I pray for you. I mean, you can trust his. Forget my words. Do you trust his? And it's not my job to get you to believe. It's my job to pass along the message. That belief is between you and God yourself. And, that's not my business. I'm supposed to mention it a couple times, then move on.
But it's tough, dude. I think it's something we always work on.
It drives me crazy that the people who will call Christians closed-minded.
Well,
are actually, they can't even see that they're the ones that are closed-minded. I'm willing to enter. You show me proof that I'm wrong. You show me proof that God's not real. You show me proof that evolution is true. And all I've been looking for is the truth my whole life. I'll change my tune. You prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, I'll change my tune.
Yeah.
Problem is you can't.
Right.
That's the problem.
Exactly. But they'll claim that they can.
But they can't.
Well, hang on. You guys, this is too broad. Because... I know for a fact on this show, and I know what happened with you when you were talking about the gutters with the kid. There are some people that are open-minded that will be receptive to this.
Yeah.
It is not our job to get upset with people that don't get it. I mean,
understood.
They're deciding to stay on their own sinking
understood.
ship.
But I understand where his frustration
maybe when I get out of preschool.
Dude, I'm still there too, dude.
Preschool.
I'm a lot better than I used to be, believe me.
I know.
And I've managed to not be nasty.
I am really amazed because I thought I was pretty broad-minded, compassionate, logical person before. And it's really surprising at how my viewpoint on so many issues have changed. in the same dramatic fashion as it does regarding this one annoying kid who's definitely annoying.
A couple of things, though, I want to say to this. If you're out there, you've just intellectually discovered God is real, expect your life to get difficult, not easier. You've just now entered basic training for the Army. It's going to be hard. And I'll also say this as a boss and as a father. I was harder on the people I loved the most, who I thought had the greatest potential. Whereas a child that has no potential, why I wouldn't.
Right.
Do you understand?
Yeah,
absolutely.
The warning that you gave is important, and there's a very good analogy for this. It's once you, like you said, get to know God intellectually, your life is going to get harder. It's like you're in the forest, in battle, and you take your camouflage off. So now the things you can't see you as a target, and that's absolutely biblical. And you have to stay diligent and honestly trust God. You will get through it for sure. Mm-hmm. These are all lessons. You have to learn about this now.
And surround yourself with other believers.
I'm going to close it out with this, because I'm going on 4 months of this now. What happened to me that I talked about on that October show was the difference between me reading about my boss and all the newspapers and books and being just in awe of the CEO and being nervous around him. And what happened around that period of time was he pulled me into his office and said, hey, you're on the right track. Keep it up. Stop worrying about all this dingleberry stuff. Keep your eye on the big picture. Nothing crazy is going to happen with us unless you do something crazy. And I just felt at ease.
Yeah.
No longer, if I go out and have beers, yes, that's a sin. But that is not in my interpretation, that is not going to disqualify me. But if I did it every single day, at some point I cross the line. Where that line exists, I'm not sure.
Keep in mind, having a beer is not drunk.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's a license to sin, but there is a very big difference between a drunkard and someone who has a beer at dinner.
Speaking of beer, we will end the show on this note. At the end of the day, there is a God up there. Get to know who Jesus Christ was. His identity is vital to where your soul, where you end up going. Look into it. He's real. Find out who he was. And with that, we are off until next week.
Yeah.
This has been Down the Rabbit Hole, a GenPopMedia.com production. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good week. See you next week.